So tonight, we're going to play a little game. We're going to start off with a game called Are They Still Together? Okay, so I spent this afternoon cutting up all of my magazines. I actually went to the nail salon. I'm like, do you still need these magazines? And I took a bunch of old ones. And we are going to play. So we'll start easy, and then we'll get harder. And there's a shocker at the end. So, and this is why you should have all been sitting in the front. Okay, let's start. Are they still together?
No.
Oh, you can't hear Jennifer and Betty. Yes. Oh. That's next week. Are they with child? That's next week. Okay. Ready? Are they still together? Jennifer and no. Are they still together? Questionable? I think there's wedding plans. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Okay, are they still together? Chris Klein and Katie Holmes? No. Are they still together? Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise? No. Are they still together? Khloe Kardashian and Scott? Wrong sister? Not Khloe? Who's this? Oh, Courtney. Sorry. Is Courtney? This is Khloe. Here's the other sister. Are they still together? Kim and Kanye. Yes. Okay. Are they still together? Demi Moore? No. Bruce Willis? Demi Moore? No. Are they still together? Yes. Prince William and yes. Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez. Are they still together? Questionable. Are Hank and Kendra still together? No, sadly. She wore a t-shirt, sorry, not sorry. And lastly, I just found out about this today. Are they still together?
No, they're not.
It was on, well, it's Jay-Z and Beyonce. It was in Us and People. Did they get their facts straight? Oh, no. Okay, somebody let me know about this one. Okay. Stay tuned for next week. We'll do Are They With Child? And the following week, we'll do Body After Baby. That one's my favorite. Okay. So what we clearly see is that our system is adulterated by the values of other cultures, and for some reason, this Western Greek Roman concepts of love and relationships have rolled into our world like a wave on the beach. And of course, if this is the one area, this one area is where the most damage can happen, and it's instantaneous, and it can have damaging effects for generations. So it could be more than any other area. It's very important for us to focus on the foundations of the Torah perspective of love and relationships. So let's learn about it from the Bible. I always joke, I have a Jamaican babysitter, and she reads the Bible every day. And she's very religious. She's actually a Seventh-day Adventist, and she keeps the Sabbath, the seventh day, and they have a lot of similar traditions to Jewish people. They don't eat pork and some things, and she's all about Jesus all day. Until my 4-year-old was like skipping to the bathroom, and he's like, oh, Jesus. And I'm like, that's not going to go very well at your yeshiva. So I went over to her, and I was like, I'm trying to be, I appreciate and I understand her religion, and it's all good, and she knows about kosher and those ideas. But when I told her about this, Jesus thing, she's like, but Jesus was a Jew. And I'm like, you're right, but not going to work right here. So she got it. So let's look at the Bible, the Torah, and what the Torah says about relationships and love. So our purpose here on earth is for us to love and to connect. And the entire purpose that we came here is for intimacy, love, and building relationships. That's the bottom line. There's two possible reasons why nobody fell off their chair. Either somebody told you this today, or we just don't appreciate what this means. But if we did appreciate what this means, it would be so astounding that you probably would fall off your chair. So a rabbi of mine, actually, who lives in Israel, and he taught me when I was living in Israel, he told me the following story that happened to him. A woman came up to him, and he teaches at a women's school, at a Jewish women's school, and she came up to him and she said, Rabbi, tomorrow I'm going back to New York. And next week I'm scheduled to have a surgery so that I will never have children. And he looked at her and he gulped and he said, okay. And she's like, what do you think about that? And he said, okay, let me give you a metaphor. Told him a story of a little kid, little boy growing up. And in kindergarten when they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, my kids are like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. I want to be, a construction worker. I'm like, don't worry, you can get 2 masters. It's all good. You could be both. But this little boy in the story said, I want to be a doctor. He did not know about Obamacare. This was a long time ago. And he said, I want to be a doctor. And he started out school, elementary school, and he was always telling his teachers, I'm going to be a doctor one day. And the teacher's like, yeah, great. Let's just pass your Common Core test, right? And let's just make sure you get through. And he goes, no, I'm really going to be a doctor. And he gets to high school, and he says, I don't care if all my friends are partying. I want to be a doctor. I'm going to take AP classes, and I'm going to work so hard. And it came 9th grade, 10th grade, and he was the top of his class, always studying. His friends were going out to see movies. And he said, no, I don't care. I don't want this. His friends were going out and getting their licenses and driving, and he said, this is what I want to focus on. I want to pass my grades. I need to get into a good college. And he works so hard, and he gets into Harvard Medical School. And he's there, and he gets into his first year of medical school, and he realizes his whole class is made up of a bunch of kids who are exactly like him, working so hard. And now he was no longer the top of his class. And he says, I don't care. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to make sure I'm at the top of my class. I need to pass. I need to get a good residency. Freshman, sophomore, junior. His friends are out, sororities, the guys are playing in sports, and he doesn't care about any of this. He goes, I want to focus on my schooling. I am going to be that doctor. And then he graduates, and he gets up there, and he sees his name. He's the top of the class. And he cannot wait. He gets a good residency, internship. And here he is in his scrubs with his gloves, ready to walk into NYU emergency room. He's made it. He's here. And as he's walking up to those double doors, I know you all watch Grey's Anatomy, as you walk up to those double doors and about to open, a woman comes running out and she goes, no, don't go there. And he looks at what are you talking about? And she goes, it's a nightmare. There's blood everywhere. There's limbs, children crying. And he's looking at this woman and he's thinking, are you crazy? He said, my whole life, I dreamed and worked so hard for me to be a doctor, and you're telling me it's a nightmare? For me, this is a dream. And he looked at that lady and he said, if you came here into this earth, if you came here to take, this world is a nightmare. There's hunger, there's sickness. This woman saying, I can't bring a child into this world. People are sitting in bomb shelters, 14 hours of the day. And people are starving, people are hungry. But yes, if you came into this world to take, it is a nightmare. But if you came into this world to give, it's a dream. In Hebrew, there is no word for love. The Hebrew word for love, which is similar to the Dead Sea skin product, is ahava, right? Now, if one of you entered a relationship, and you put it on your Facebook status, right, in a relationship or engaged, and everybody knows, oh, she's in a relationship, great. And if you run over to that girl and you pull her aside and you say, do you love him? Do you love him? And then she has to start to ask herself a series of questions, and she says, wait a second. What does he do to make me happy? Does he buy me things? Does he surprise me at work? Does he take me on nice vacations to Aruba? Me. What does this relationship do to me? But if you pull aside a person who understands about ahava, what ahava is, now what does ahava mean? Ahava comes from the Hebrew word of hav. Hav means to give. So ahava can be explained as a state where all I want to do is to give to another. So do I have ahava for him means how much am I willing to give up for this person's sake? Because his priorities are now mine. And how much am I willing to give up from myself for him? Not me. There is no word for love in Hebrew. It's ahava. So this concept of love so easily slips off our tongue from the Roman Western concepts of, into this Jewish vocabulary, and it totally adulterates our world. And hence we have books, such as 50 Shades of Grey, which you can see in theaters on February 14th, right? Yeah, I saw that, don't worry. But if love is letting go of yourself for someone else, then this actually changes the definition of marriage. Okay, by the way, again, there is no Hebrew word for marriage. What's the Hebrew word? So before we get to the Hebrew word for marriage, how do we describe marriage? If we were to look up in a dictionary, I mean, I know it's constantly changing, not Wikipedia because that is not trustworthy, but if you were to look up what marriage means. So marriage is two people who get together and they say, I'll take out the trash, right? And you do the dishes, okay? I'll go to work and you take care of the children. It's like a mutual parasitic relationship. And this can be a great marriage, right? This is how things work. Two people seemingly love each other. You know, he never bothers his wife. You know, he pays the credit card bills. He brings home nice things for her. You know, takes care of the children on Sundays so I can go get a manicure, right? She always cooks dinner, right? If only people would have this kind of marriage, this would be actually great. This is a 50-50 deal. This is like a business arrangement. And actually, this is why several marriages will fall apart, because up until both parties dishing out their part, then it's okay. But at some point, the people you're working with, they might disappoint you, and the minute they break that contract, you say, why am I doing business with this person anymore? If I'm not getting what I need out of it, right? I'm doing the dishes, and I'm taking care of the kids, and I'm paying the bills, and I'm going out to work. So what's going on here? So as soon as you break the contract, you break the business deal. Now, most people are reliable for most of the time until somebody cuts them off. So now in Hebrew, what's the Hebrew word for marriage? Marriage is known as, there's two parts to the marriage. There's kiddushin and nisuin. Now, the word nisuin, you'll see it a lot of times if you go to a wedding, and you'll say simchat nisuin, which means the wedding ceremony of, right, the names. You put on the kippah, it's really nice. So nisuin comes from the Hebrew word of noseh, which actually means to carry. So here, what's the definition of marriage? It's an arrangement while under the chuppah, you look at your spouse and you say, no matter how heavy you get, I will carry you. I will noseh you. And it's a promise, no matter what happens, I will carry you. It's not a legal treaty if you do this and then I'll do this. I want to take out the trash and I want to do the dishes and I want to go to work and I want to take care, the kids and bring home the money and everything, unless you don't want to, which is also fine. But we can talk about that and we'll do whatever's good for you. But we can work this relationship out like that. Because really in life, my job is to love you and to take care of you and to ensure that you are happy and to make sure that you're thriving. And here's the key line. When you're in a relationship, you want to make sure that the potential of your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, their potential in life is secured. You want to be there for that. That is ahava. Now, people will often ask, so that's selfless. What am I getting out of it? How am I supposed to explain this to you? So here's the problem, and this is a big problem with social media, and we actually taught a class here on the evolution of the selfie, and the idea of social media is kind of like, I am what you think I am. I could be sitting at home in bed, curled up, on my computer, but posting pictures from 2 years ago, before I had Facebook, on my vacation, and be like, this is amazing. And everyone's like, Faigy, where are you? I'm like, I'm in Puerto Rico, right? You have no idea. When I was on maternity leave, I had off 6 weeks. I literally sat in bed and I had my whole bed was like, everything was connected. Like I had an extension cord for my laptop and for my phone and for everything. So God forbid if we disconnected from the social media world for even those 6 weeks. This was our life. So the social media infiltrates our life and our views of marriage. Like, ooh, look what he surprised me with. I got this really nice bouquet of flowers. Let me post it. That's actually really for a whole nother class, the problem with posting on social media. But what we think life is, according to social media and to Facebook and to Instagram. Is there anybody here who does not have Facebook? Okay, Asher. Or Instagram? Or a Twitter account? Good for you. Good for you. I don't have Twitter because I don't know how to tweet yet, but as soon as I do, I will be tweeting. Actually, that's what my name means. My Hebrew name is Faigy, so I'm a bird and like tweet. I like to talk a lot. when my mom came back from parent-teacher conferences in 9th grade, they're like, Faigy takes her namesake really seriously. So what do we think according to social media? We think life is about a 2-car garage, a house in the Hamptons, a ski vacation, right? You think that that's what life is about, but if you think that's what life is about, let me explain to you what it is. Life is not indicated by my heartbeat, right? Or by my blood pressure rising when he walks into the room or my respiratory activity. Life is actually indicated by the level of ahava you are experiencing. Anyone who's ever experienced real love knows exactly what I'm talking about. When you have that one person on your mind and that fills every single thought and you're just thinking, what can I buy her? How can I surprise her? If I give her a little call, like at work, is that going to make her happy? Where all you're thinking about, does she like these flowers? No, I don't like baby's breath, just if anybody wants to know, I don't. But when you lose that person, when your whole life is filled with that person and you lose that person, it feels like death. Even though your heart is still beating and everything's okay, that's not called life. That is death. So imagine the following metaphor. Many of you know my husband, Rabbi Leib Keleman, and men, when they get sick, like the world comes to an end. So not that I'm speaking any bad about him because he's here in the room, but no, not at all. But like they have a cold and it's like, oh my God, I am dying, right? So here's the following scenario. I'm all sitting on the couch and he's like, Faigy, I'm like really not feeling well. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, do you want a cup of coffee? Like, did you not have your coffee this morning? He's like, no, I don't know. I'm like, do you want OJ? Like, is that going to help you? No, I don't know. My head is killing me. I'm like, do you want me to get up from this couch and go look if I have Tylenol? And he'd be like, yeah, that's great. Okay. So I get up, I go to the cabinet, medicine cabinet, I open it up, I pick up the Tylenol bottle, I'm like, perfect, this is gonna save it. And I pick it up and it's empty. And I'm like, oh man, do I love him enough to pick myself up and ask a neighbor if she has Tylenol? So I'm like, okay, I text my neighbor, I'm like, hey Maren, do you have Tylenol? And she's like, nope, sorry, all out. I'm like, okay, do I love him enough to get into my car and drive 15 minutes to the 24-hour CVS to get him that Tylenol? I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I strap myself in the car, I start driving there, I get there, and it says, pharmacy is closed, under construction, 24-hour CVS is no longer 24 hours. I'm like, oh my gosh. I Google the closest 24-hour CVS, and like it's the next town over. I'm like, oh no, I am not driving to Plainview to pick up some Tylenol for him. So I'm like, okay. So I go over, I'm like, do you think you're going to be okay without the Tylenol? And he's like, no, Faigy, I think I need a doctor. I'm like, oh no. You got to go to the doctor? Okay, I got to get a babysitter. Okay, let's get a babysitter. Let's go to the doctor. And now I'm not going to use Leib because I don't want to use him, God forbid. But if this scenario would get worse and worse and worse, and I get to the doctor, and the doctor looks at me and says, I'm sorry, miss, your husband needs a blood transfusion. I love him enough to pull out my arm and start giving him some blood. Or, God forbid, your husband needs a kidney transplant. How much am I willing to give up from myself for the person I love? And that is indicated by the level of ahava. So 10 years I'm married to this guy, and now I'm not going to give him what he needs? I'm not going to give him that kidney? But most people don't realize that the more you give to someone else, as you're giving to that person, that is what creates love. And the more you let go of what you want, the more you really give, the easier it becomes. And the more exquisite the relationship becomes. And eventually you can raise the level of love so high that there's nothing in the way. It's like, I'll give him my Chanel shoes if it fits him. At that point, I don't know if they have Chanel for guys. I don't know. I could get him a nice pair. I could trade in my Prada shoes for him, and I would do that. So eventually, as soon as you can raise that level up so high that there is nothing in the way. So now, we explained a little bit about dating with Rabbi Lawrence last week, and now we want to know how you create love. So we say, bottom line is, the more you let go of what you want, of me, and to him, the more you love the other person. Now, you have to understand that there is a line called abuse, and you should never, ever cross that line. It's like, how much can you take, and how much can you give? And that's actually why you are allowed to break relationships, and sometimes it's healthier to break off relationships, like the ones that Rabbi Lawrence spoke about that last 6 years. But often relationships will fall apart because people often care about themselves. They only care about themselves, but also when they commit adultery. Now, wait a second. What am I talking about? I know I did give you some examples of, People Magazine's latest couples, but we're going to try to understand a little bit what it means at these stages of adultery that you can pass, that relationships can fall apart. So there are 2 stages to adultery. Once you commit stage 1 of adultery, you are a walking time bomb until you commit stage 2. Okay, so what's stage 1 of adultery? So now usually, because of a fear of intimacy, and instead of relating to the person, we'll talk about what a fear of intimacy means, you often relate to the person externals as opposed to their internals. So let me give you an example. You're out on a date, right? Okay, and not in a bar where you're screaming in someone's ear and they're like, you want to go, on Sunday to play some golf? And they're like, what? Like, you want another drink? Like, you have no idea what they're talking about. I'm talking a real date where you know it's a date and not just you're not sure what it is, but where you're on a real date and sitting down. And you start talking to the person and you're sitting across from them and you start to stare into their eyes. Not because you're tired or you have a hangover, but because you are starting to open up. And now actually, speech is the ultimate level, the ultimate connector. So you start to talk to the person, and you start to stare at them, and you start feeling that you have that feeling that a normal human being has when they start to open up to somebody, and that's like, there's this kind of thrill. And the more you open up, the more thrilling it gets. Until it gets to a point where it's scary. And you're like, oh, wait a second. Hold on. I don't want to penetrate any deeper. I don't want to get any more serious because I'm so scared of what opening up will do for me, how it will look for me. So instead of opening up more, you're like, okay, wait a second, hold it right there. I don't want to penetrate anymore. I'm just going to hold on to your hand, right? That feels really good, right? And you can keep talking like this, and you're like, oh, how about we go to a movie, right? It's nice, it's dark, it feels intimate, and it feels nice, it feels close in some way, but all of a sudden you shut down the intimacy, the connection. So the easiest way to think that you're still holding on to the intimacy and to the connection is by holding on to externals. See, we're holding hands. Ooh, he loves me, right? Or like you put your arm around them and you're like, oh, this is amazing. And you even take a selfie. And now the rest of the world is like, this is amazing. Externally, my relationship looks so good on paper, right? We are on the, I clearly am a Facebook stalker because I know everybody's honeymoon pictures, where they've been and where they've gone to and increased. There's like this amazing, you can get an amazing view from like your porch window. I know one day, hopefully Amach and I will travel there and it'll be like, oh, I am now standing where everybody once stood. And actually Kim Kardashian did her honeymoon there twice. So I don't know if that's good with 2 different people, but the idea where externally it can look so good. But the truth is, when you hold on to the externals, what's the problem? Every single person is unique, okay? And if I love you for who you really are, I cannot worry about the externals. What do I mean? Because the more you know somebody, the more you realize that there's nobody else like this person in the world. The only people who really look alike are people you don't know. Take Asian people, right? No hate against Asian people. Some of my best friends are Asian. But today, when I was getting a manicure, and I ruined my nail, and I wanted to go back to the woman, I want to take a poll, by the way, how many girls would go back to fix their manicure, and how many would just walk out? How many would fix it? Okay, right, I'm paying the $26 for a manicure, I should get my money's worth. So I'm looking around, I'm like, which one did my nails? I'm like, I have no idea. It's like when you go to a Chinese restaurant and you're like, waiter, and he looks at you and goes, I'm not your waiter. I'm like, I just ordered with you a second ago. And he's like, no, it was that one, right? So the only reason why they don't look alike is because you don't know them. But the more you get to know somebody, you start to realize how unique they are and how different they are. So now, God forbid, I start to fall for somebody's externals instead of really connecting with them. I am now guilty of stage 1 adultery. If I love the person for their externals, whether it be money or power or car or good looks, whatever it is, I am now committing stage 1 of adultery. Why? Because if I love somebody for their beautiful ears, right? Ears are very generic, right? She has beautiful ears. And if I love her just for her ears, I am now that walking time bomb for stage 2. And what is that? I pick myself up and I find somebody else with beautiful ears. And now I've committed adultery. So let's take an easy example. Intelligence, right? Intelligence is very easy. I had a really good friend who she's a grown woman, she has an MD, PhD, went to school with her, and she is brilliant. From the time she was in high school, she had a photographic memory. And you know what? She had a very hard time making friends. Well, not just because she was brainy, but because every time someone looked at her, all they saw was the flash of her IQ. And they're like, oh my goodness, oh, that girl, she just this massive brain. And they totally missed her feelings, right? The only thing that we saw was her externals. Now, yes, she's a wonderful woman, she's married, and she has children, but the idea where she always missed that social piece because nobody got to really know her because of that. Now, what does the Torah say about this? The Torah says if you have an IQ of 180, fake 150. You should be beautiful, but you shouldn't be flashy. You shouldn't be flashing your externals because you will never allow someone to get to know you. I was at the pool the other day, and I'm sitting there with my friend, and she's talking, and this other girl walks in. She just moved into the neighborhood. She seems really sweet, and I'm like, let me get to know her, right? Our kids are the same age. We go to the same schools. This could be great. And all she's doing is like, I have a pool in my backyard, so like I don't even know why I'm at the community pool. I'm like, okay, she has a pool in her backyard. It's really nice. I'm like, okay. And then she's like, yeah. I'm like, she heard me talking about some vacation. She's like, yeah, my husband always says, he grew up, he never went on a family vacation. So like, I just want to take my kids on family vacations. We're going to Disney next week. I'm like, really nice. I'm like, here I am sitting here at the pool trying to make a relationship with this person, but it's not working because all she's doing is flashing her externals. And then I look down and I see her Tory Burch flats, which are not so expensive because Tory Burch is totally affordable. So she's like sitting there with her, and then I look and I'm like, oh, what kind of pool bag does she have, right? And I'm connecting to her on her externals. I'm like, Mark by Marc Jacobs, okay. And I'm trying to connect with her, but these externals keep flashing. And I'm like, oh, what does she have? And what do I have? And what can I show to her? And there goes our relationship. Done. I'll never be able to look at her the same way. So what happens is when we connect to that class clown, right? I have a really good friend. He's actually really good friends with my husband and I. And he is just probably one of the funniest guys I know. Really funny. He can have this room dying of laughter. Everything he says, you just can't stop laughing. But the problem is people can't get to know him. They don't realize that deep down he's a sweetheart. Yes, maybe he's sarcastic, but nobody gets to know the real him because all they say, oh, class clown. Oh, here comes the funny guy. An external can be flashed by money, prestige, work. I'm not going to say what women flash and what men flash. You guys know what we flash. We flash things, but we're not allowing ourselves to connect. So here, actually, one of my rabbis explained to me how you can connect when someone's flashing. So let's say you go out on a date, and the guy's like, oh, yeah, I'm a doctor. And you're like, oh, really? That's so nice. You're like, okay, here he is, Jewish guy, doctor, grab him, right? That's what your internal is saying, right? But really, you're realizing that he's starting to flash. And he's like, yeah, graduate top of the class. Yeah, right, great guy. Are there any doctors in the room? No? Oh. Okay, a dentist. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm putting all the hate on the doctors. So here's this guy, he's like a doctor. So you realize immediately he's flashing. So as soon as he flashes, you try to get to the internal and you say, oh, really? What kind of doctor are you? He's like, pediatrician. And you're like, oh, why did you go into pediatrics? And as soon as you start digging into that internal, he's like, do you want another drink? Or do you want to go see a movie, right? As soon as you start digging in there and there's no essence to him, could be he's an amazing guy. And he went into pediatrics to save the world. And he can be the best father in the world. But if he's faking it, if he's not there, if he's just external, you'll be able to get to him immediately. And the way that we build relationships is internal. And I just want to end with this idea where the Talmud asks a question about whether you're allowed to perform certain medical procedures on Shabbat. So the Talmud answers that you are allowed to perform medical procedures if it's an internal wound, but if it's an external wound, you can't. So take, for example, someone, and he does stitches, and at one point he would perform stitches on Shabbat. And he says, if this is an external wound, am I allowed to treat it? So the Talmud says, no. only if it's an internal wound. So if it would cause internal bleeding, or if it went deep enough that it would affect, the nerve, then you would be allowed to perform that on Shabbat. So then the Talmud says, what about the eyes? What if somebody damages one of their eyes? Are you allowed to perform surgery to fix something that happens on the eyes? Is the eye internal organ or an external organ? And it explains that the eyes are actually an internal organ because the veins of the eyes connect back to the heart. So the eyes are the part of the heart that stick out of the body. So now how do we connect? Through our eyes. And when we really connect to somebody and we're looking into their eyes deeply, not holding their hands and curling on the couch with a pint of Ben & Jerry's, which also sounds really good, and I can go for that on any night, but to really connect to somebody internally is to stare into their eyes. And I'm going to do it to you right now. And it's really, really scary. And you're like, why is she looking at me? She's not asking a question. I'm putting you on the spot here, but what am I doing? You realize it's scary, so I turn away. And I look at her, and now I'm scaring you. When you start to peer into, I'm a really scary teacher, right? What I'm doing to you is you're starting to connect. And as soon as you start to connect, you're getting to know the internal, the real person. So the stages of adultery are, one, not connecting to the person internally, but connecting through your externals. And stage 2 is finding somebody with those exact same externals. So what we need to do is we need to learn to relate deeply and not superficially, which is easy to do. And like I said, you push the elevator button when somebody is starting to flash their externals and start to go down a few floors and say, hey, wait a second, why did you do this? And why did you go into this? And do you really care about it? And do you have an internal soul that I can connect to, that I am willing to give to, and then I can eventually come to love that person to the point where I'm willing to give up anything for that person because we become one. And that is the real definition of love. Any questions?